we talked about this a couple of days ago, right? George was talking about doing a blog about the things he didn't like about House of the Dragon Season 2. And he was talking about, I had his blog open right here, and I wanted to look at it on stream, right? That's what the plan was for today. And I tried opening it, and it was page not found. Now, I assumed that the blog just got blasted by people trying to connect to it, right? Because it was apparently a very scathing review. George R. R. Martin has now taken down his blog post regarding mistakes made in the first episode and the implications they have on the series. He took it down. What? I didn't even get a chance to read it. Now, luckily, what I do know is that Quinn, the GM, just covered it. He made a video just 2 hours ago. So I want to watch it. Because I was going to read it on stream, but now I can't. Why did he take it down? Let's investigate. Let us investigate. Let us investigate.
I also like that he specifically mentions that we're spared the sight of the death and a sound effect suffices. That was a very powerful choice in my...
I think this is like one thing that modern day audiences tend to overlook a lot. The power of censorship. I think a lot of the time the stuff you don't see and just hear about is infinitely worse than anything you could ever show and anything you could ever convey. That is the art of implied horror. A lot of series that are censored by design, like they're a lot more memorable because you make up the worst kind of stuff imaginable in your own brain. And that's what makes it scary. A lot of the time, for example, like in The Walking Dead, even stuff like Avatar, there are a lot of things that are censored, but because they're told to you, right? You fill in the gaps, and because of the way we are wired, you fill in the gaps with the worst kind of stuff. So sometimes not seeing it is so much more effective than anything you could ever show, regardless of how brutal it is.
But yeah,
it's beautiful. This is also the case with Boa in One Piece. We only ever hear bits and pieces of her story, and that's it. And I think that is genius.
This paragraph is really strange. In Ryan's outline for Season 3, Helena kills herself for no particular reason. There is no fresh horror, no triggering event to overwhelm the fragile young queen. He's just straight up spoiling stuff.
Yeah, okay. I see what's going on here. I think George got a bit too salty. I think bro got locked in and bro was real salty. He was like, they're Season 3, they're just aiming to kill her for like no reason. How dumb is that? Oh my god, send. And then like an hour later, bro gets a call from HBO. Okay, I see why it was taken down.
Like, this isn't like...
Hopefully I don't get DMCA'd.
He's spoiling what happens in the book. He's saying that this is what happens in Ryan's outline for Season 3.
He's made an oopsie, I think.
Which is bizarre. It seems like he's kind of trying to shoot the show in the foot here. Like, yes, there...
It does seem like he's giving himself a way out. It does. It does seem like with this whole, I'm gonna write a post about it, it does seem like he's almost like saying, I want to wash my hands clean of this and move on. It honestly does seem like that.
There are issues with the butterfly.
Because like if you look at Game of Thrones and if you look at Robert Kirkman with The Walking Dead again, they just drifted away. Like Kirkman just stopped talking about the show. He like occasionally mentions its existence and acknowledges that it still exists, but he's not active in it at all. Right? A part of that is because he was suing them, but still. And it seems like it's the same thing with Martin. Like with Game of Thrones, he just literally stopped talking about it, basically. So it is interesting that he's now like, you know.
that are a flap in here, given that this is a massive issue with the story, but it's just... It's strange. It seems like he had such goodwill towards the show as early as the beginning of it and as recently as the beginning of this season. And it's strange that, like, I don't know, he's really not giving any benefit of the doubt here. Like, it's clear that the writing situation around Season 2 was quite fraught, given the writer's strike and given just the many elements working against it, most notably HBO's budget cuts and cutting the season from 8 episodes down to 10, but... Martin is taking it out on the writers a lot, which is strange given that he had pretty much no vocal criticism towards David and Dan with Game of Thrones Season 8. Rather, he just kind of, vague.
Yeah, I think he just said, it's too far gone. It's too far gone. It is what it is. Just do whatever the hell you want. I'm done. I think that's what the situation was with Thrones, and there was like no need to deconstruct it.
Vaguely alluded to his criticisms thereof. I'm going to read this final section in full and then give what I think is an important thought about it. Maelor by himself means little. He is a small child, he does not have a line of dialogue, does nothing of consequence but die, but when and where and how, that does matter. Losing Maelor weakened at the end.
Which, by the way, the way he lays it out here, think about it in like a inverse sense, right? If he has no lines of dialogue, does nothing but die, and he is just a little boy, doesn't that tell you how important that moment and everything around that death is, if that is literally his only bit of importance? You sort of frame this argument in terms of minimizing it, but in minimizing it, you actually expose how incredibly important it really is. So it's interesting to see
cheese sequence.
What
but
he
it also
thinks
cost
about
us the Bitter Bridge scene with all its horror and heroism. It undercut the motivation for Helena's, I don't know if I can say that word on YouTube. And that in turn sent thousands into the streets and alleys, screaming for justice for their murdered quote-unquote queen. None of that is essential, I suppose, but all of it does serve a purpose. It all helps tie the story together, so one thing follows another in a logistical and convincing manner. What will we offer fans instead once we've killed these butterflies? I have no idea. I do not recall that Ryan and I ever discussed this back when he first told me they were pushing back on Aegon's second son. Maelor himself is not essential, but if losing him means we lose Bitterbridge, Helena's word, and riots, then it's a considerable loss. And there are other, larger, more toxic butterflies to come if House of the Dragon goes ahead with some of the changes being contemplated for seasons 3 and 4. And then he signs it, which is unique for a blog post, and he doesn't have a mood, which is, all of it's really strange. I think the key element here is, I do not recall that Ryan and I ever discussed this back when he
I think George is in a bit of a devious mood, and I think bro just cooked. Bro just cooked and just left it
first
there.
Told me they were pushing back on Aegon's second son. He is having this conversation with us, the viewers, directly via his Notablog, rather than having a conversation with Ryan Condal himself. And that strikes me as very, very odd. Like, I don't know, like, why take this to the court of public opinion, I apologize, rather than actually talking about this with Condal and maybe reaching some consensus and changing the actual...
If I was George, this is exactly what I would do, and I will explain why. Because after the catastrophe that was Game of Thrones Season 8, initially, people were like, they just messed it up. Right? And then people started talking about how George gave them notes of where it was supposed to go. And suddenly, some of the blame, I'm not saying all the blame, I don't think anyone really blamed George, but some of the blame suddenly pivoted towards George. And when you have some of like 50 million or however many people are watching Game of Thrones, that's a lot of heat. So this time, he sees one thing where he's like, nah, you're not doing this, you're not doing this, so let me just real quick type up that I am against this. So, I think this is George getting ahead of any fallout that might come for him. Straight up. And that's why I think he's writing in the court of public opinion. George is a smart dude. I know he's not very tech savvy, right? He writes on a computer with like no internet or whatever, but I would suspect that he knows full well that even pulling this, people would see it and people would talk about it. That's what I would do if I was George. I would put this out, even knowing that I will get blasted by HBO, if I genuinely thought that they were setting the show up for failure. I would get ahead of it and make sure that none of that fallout ever comes for me. That's what I would do. That would unironically be my Joker play, and I would never say a single word about it. I would put it out there, wait for the call from HBO, say, okay, I'm sorry, I messed up, I'll take it down. Then I would sit there in silence, rub my hands together, and just say, anyway, and my plan would be done. It would be glorious. It would be absolutely glorious. Let's finish this, and then I'll catch up on
Future
chat.
of the show. It's strange. It's odd to me. It's unlike anything Martin has ever done before, and it's unclear how this will affect the future of the series. If I'm Ryan Condal, I might be kind of pissed by this, that rather than kind of talking to me about the issues he's having, he is instead airing this sort of dirty laundry in public. Not only is he questioning your decision-making, but he also is kind of vocally...
I disagree with this. Any person adapting any person's story should immediately listen to them to the fullest degree. Yes, there are things that are impossible for logistical reasons. That is the single only exception where you should not listen to the original author. Everything else, you'll listen to the original dude and why those things are there. Not what things, why those things are there. And he just explained exactly why Maelor is important.
Sharing your outline for the future season of the show.
So,
honestly,
he can be mad, but I don't think he is justified in being mad because it's not his thing. It's not. House of the Dragon is not Ryan's thing.
If I'm HBO, there might be some issues there too. This is just... it's unprecedented, as I've said before, and I'm really not sure what to make of it. With that said, I 100% agree with his criticisms. I think that a lot of the issues in the changes made to House of the Dragon are that they lack consideration for this butterfly effect that they're going to have on the future of the book. They're creating further problems for themselves down the line, and they're really not learning from the sins of the father, from the sins of Game of Thrones. With that said, I don't think the changes made here or in the show in general are as bad as Game of Thrones Season 8. And I think that in general, changes from the source material are just better in relation to Fire and Blood than to A Song of Ice and Fire, as A Song of Ice and Fire is an excellent text, whereas
A Song of Ice and Fire versus Game of Thrones is, I never knew that the differences were that big until I actually read the books myself. They feel almost like two completely different universes. Like, straight up. Even the magic system of Thrones versus A Song of Ice and Fire is literally two different stories. It's wild. It is absolutely wild.
Fire and Blood is a history book which has its gaps and has its flaws. So overall, these are some really interesting thoughts. I'd love to hear your opinions in the comments below. While you're down there, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow, and I'll be back to talk about much more A Song of Ice and Fire in the very near future. Thank you, everyone.
All right, I'll link this in chat in a second. I've watched a lot of Quinn's videos. Quinn is a very good creator for Thrones stuff. To be fair, the Hot D writers have been just going on interviews implying the source materials are all propaganda while the show version is canon events. It's got to be frustrating. Yes, 100% is frustrating. And I don't know if it's like if it's like what they're saying just being poorly phrased, because like in a way they are right? Like to a certain degree, them saying that the books are propaganda, it is correct. Because that is the whole appeal of Fire and Blood, that is written from three different perspectives and you never know which one is true. So to a degree, yes, it is shaped by propaganda. But to say that all of it is propaganda and that the show is like the definitive version, that is goofy. It's goofy, and it shouldn't be said like that. I don't know. And I'm 1,000,000% with George. Like the fact that he's angry, because like I would be more on their side if this was the first thing, you know? There you could say they removed Maelor, and yes, he has very big importance, but maybe they can like cook up something in its place and they can patch up those holes, you know, and it wouldn't be that bad. But for George, keep in mind, he went through all of this for years. He like try to just picture yourself. I mean, we can't. Like I could say this, but we can't. Picture yourself in George's position. You have the biggest show on television, period, for like 7, 8, 9 years in a row. And they mess it up so bad that your show's ending becomes the go-to for a horrible ending. They messed up his material so bad that it literally becomes the poster child for a bad ending. That must hurt so much. And then House of the Dragon comes out. With season 1, he's saying, I like the show's Viserys more than my Viserys. He praises season 1, and then he sees season 2 doing the same thing again. Starting to change things for no reason. And I think for him, that is like literally flashbacks. I can totally understand why for him, it is like, I just don't want this again. I literally think it's as simple as that. Diplomacy failed, it seems. Communication with the hot D writers also failed for him. I think it's like that, yeah. It's interesting that he pulled it down. It has to be because of the spoilers. I think it might be a I think it might be a light Yagami play. Yeah, it's just gone. I don't know if that's what he did, but if his plan was genuinely to like burn the contact and just like get ahead of it, that's freaking genius. That is actually genius. How this will affect his relationship with HBO considering they have more series out? I mean, hard to say. Hard to say. It's very hard to say. This whole adaptation thing is, I think talking about adaptations is always really, really, really hard, you know? Because I am very much of two minds about the adaptation process. Like I said, I think you should always, without exception, listen to the author of the main thing and the reasoning behind certain things, right? But at the same time, you shouldn't just blindly copy it. So I do think there also needs to be a degree of adapting it for a different setting. And I don't think you should necessarily also... Like, George is a writer, right? He's a writer of novels. Being a writer for novels doesn't necessarily make you very good at writing a TV show. Those are two different things. But at the same time, most of the criticisms now are not around structure or anything like that. They are actually about the fundamental pillars of the story. You know, so with all of these like adaptation discussions, I think there is a lot of intricacies that, depending on who you ask, people will look at differently. You know, like George shouldn't be listened to at all because it's just like his book and the adaptation is its own thing. To a certain degree, I agree with this, but at the same time, the only reason why the original thing exists is because of George's book. So George has infinitely more insight into that than anyone else on this planet. That is an indisputable fact, you know? Wouldn't it be sad if George just stopped working with HBO and then he got bored? And then what else is he gonna do except write The Winds of Winter? Wouldn't that be sad? I think all of us would be very, very sad if that happened. I do also suspect that throughout all of this, I watched people covering the interview, right? I looked into the interview where he was talking about how, like, wait, was it on his blog? I think it was. I don't think it was a blog. It might have been a blog, or it might have been a... I can't find it. But basically, George was talking about, like, he went to Tolkien's grave and was basically wondering about his own legacy, right? And I do think that that might also have something to do with this. The fact that his legacy is an incomplete series of books and now a second television show that is deviated from the material and messed up. And like I said, I cannot even imagine the burden that must take on you. That the stuff you have built and that has been beloved by so many people just keeps getting ruined time and time and time again. And your main story was never even finished. That's rough. That is rough.